for coming. Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for coming. We've got a wonderful event this morning, and I'm proud to say I think all of our events this year have been great successes. This is our final luncheon of the year. Those of you who are guests here, we're happy to have you here. We hope that you will consider becoming a member. The benefits of membership are numerous, including the access to IBIS World and PE Connection, and of course, most importantly, the relationships that you build up in the organization. After I became a member, the deal flow for me just increased significantly. A word about our sponsors. Sponsors are the lifeblood of the organization, and we're very thankful that we have them. If any of your organizations would like to consider sponsorship, please contact Christine or Michelle King. And finally, we have our new website up. It's doing very, very well. We've got a lot of great responses. But if anybody has any suggestions about it, please contact Christine about that as well. We want to make this website as easy and as friendly as possible. So thanks for coming and enjoy the day.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce the moderator for today, Eric Dunn, who's the Managing Director at Focus Capital Advisors. It's a boutique banking firm serving both manufacturing and business service industries. Collectively, that firm and the partners have closed over 200 M&A transactions. It's been kind of a special organization here in our midst. Eric joined Focus Capital in 2007 as an associate and was promoted to partner in 2011. Prior to that, Eric was co-founder of a technology and IT services firm known as the Software Alliance, which was successfully sold to a tech firm a few years later. Eric will be moderating our panel today and will bring to bear his prior experience in middle market business services and buy and sell side advisory. So please welcome Eric Dunn.
John Svoboda is the co-founder and managing director of Svoboda Capital. Prior to forming Svoboda, John was a partner in the corporate finance department at William Blair & Company until 1997, when he left the firm to form their current firm with Michelle Collins. A lot of people, I think, know her as well. John is a board member, as you guys can see here, of several businesses, also several non-for-profit organizations. I thought this was interesting. He's also an advisory board member to the Chicago Fire. John, if you could, tell us a little bit more about your firm and your focus.
Terrific. Thank you, Eric, and it's terrific to be here. So we're obviously a Chicago-based firm. Our mission is to find, invest, and help build excellent value-added distribution and business service companies with enterprise values up to $100 million. So we focus on companies across the country, 3 to 15 million of EBITDA. Typically, we're partnering with managements to do recaps of those businesses, so we would prefer to buy 60 to 80% of a business rather than 90 to 100%, because 80% of our deals, we're taking an existing management team, whether it's private equity backed or family owned, that would like some liquidity, but really wants to have their cake and eat it too, and we say, we'll give you some liquidity, put some leverage on the business, help you make add-on acquisitions, and let's get to the Super Bowl in 5 years. So within business services, we focus on healthcare services, professional services, and marketing services. We've got a staff of 10 people all here in Chicago, and again, it's terrific to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So next we have David Zucker. David is a managing partner of Lead Lap Enterprises, which makes its investments from a family office holding company. Prior to Lead Lap, David held several executive level positions, all in the business services industries. See if I can get this right. Most notably to me, David was an executive at ESPN and Playboy Enterprises, which makes David the luckiest man on earth and my personal hero. So, David, tell us more.
Yeah, so Lead Lap, we've been active for about 6 years. We've done a number of transactions, primarily in the business services, marketing services, and healthcare services space. We actually exited the business in April of this year and closed. We bought it was a marketing services company based in New York called Svoboda, and we just recently closed on a healthcare services business headquartered in Atlanta. And we typically look for smaller deals, sort of 1 to 4 million of EBITDA. More recently, I'd say more 1 to 3 million of EBITDA in this environment. We also look to keep, if there's an interest, keep ownership, maybe rolling 20% of the equity, not a requirement. We also tend to look for situations that are a little more messy. Could be a customer concentration issue. We bought one of the business we just sold. We bought off a year in which they actually lost money. In the year that we bought the company, they ended up making about 4. So it was a little bit of a messy situation. So we look for those kinds of opportunities.
Great, thanks, David. Greg is a founding managing partner at Silver Oak Services Partners. Silver Oak only invests in service businesses. Prior to Silver Oak, Greg was a founding managing director of a private equity firm, Nautic Partners. Previously to Nautic Partners, Nautic Partners was actually formed by the leaders of another private equity firm, which is Fleet Equity Partners. You can see from Greg's background, he's certainly very qualified to be here. We're happy to have him. We'd like him to give us a little bit more on his firm.
Sure. Hi everyone. Silver Oak grew up in Evanston, just north of the city of Chicago here. So we got started in 2006. We're a middle market fund focused on service sector companies. So hence I think why Eric invited me here. But we do business, consumer, and healthcare services. We're investing out of our second fund, which is a $200 million vehicle. Our size range is probably closer to John's, probably 3 to 20 million of EBITDA. We're writing equity checks anywhere between kind of 8 and 30 million out of this second fund, or about 40% deployed to date in that vehicle. We typically do control deals, so I'd say 90% of what we do are controlled transactions. Again, buying anywhere from 51 to 90% of a company's equity. We will, on rare cases, take a significant minority position in kind of a growth company. We don't do a lot of syndicate or club deals or things like that, but we will partner with a management team that is having second thoughts about getting rid of control. So we have done that before. Recently we've done, I guess this year, 2 new platforms, one in the staffing sector, so human capital area, and another in the payroll processing space.
Great, thanks. And last but certainly not least, a friend of MBBI, Kelly Cornelis is a partner at LaSalle Capital. Kelly is responsible for sourcing deals, structuring, negotiating, managing portfolio companies, and managing investor relations. It is rumored that in her spare time she sometimes does sleep. In addition, prior to joining LaSalle, Kelly was a vice president at SB Partners, which is a lower middle market focused private equity firm. And before that, she was an alumni of the same company as John here at William Blair and Company. Kelly is also a board member of several of the service-based businesses that her firm owns. And Kelly will let you give us a little bit more.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. LaSalle Capital, our roots really go back to the mid-'80s when we were operating as an independent sponsor. And then we raised our first institutional, committed fund in 2004. I joined around that time, so I've been with the firm about 10 years. Joined up with our founding partners, Rocco Martino and Jeff Walters. We focus on partnering with growth companies that are smaller, 2 to 10 million of EBITDA. We focus on 2 industry verticals: food and beverage businesses, and then business services. Within business services, we have invested in facility services, healthcare business services, marketing services, and more recently have gotten more into tech-enabled services as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Greg. All right, so the format for today's panel, guys, we have 2 case studies with different types of service-based companies. None of the people here on our panel have seen anyone else's responses, so it'll be interesting to see how everyone saw it. There may be wrestling, and that's allowed. What we'll do is we'll kind of walk through the highlights of the first case study here, and we'll just kind of point out that the information you guys are going to see is the only information that the private equity panel was given. So clearly, everyone's going to make some assumptions when they put this together. So the commercial refrigeration services business, we have 22 million of revenue, a little bit under 5 million of EBITDA. We've got one owner. It looks like he's young by exit standards, but very, very motivated to do something. And he's already transitioned his company, or a lot of his responsibilities, to other managers in the company. So pretty clean. What does the company do? Well, they're a full service refrigeration support business, right? So their clients are in what are we in here? We're in C-stores, we're in mass merchants, we're in restaurants. They're doing repair work as well as some retrofitting of refrigeration machines. We got non-union employees, 90 of them. Looks like they're all very well. They all have a lot of experience. So here's kind of a look at the customers. We can see, convenience stores is really where they're making their bones. Top customers been around for a long time. It's down to 9% of sales. And looks like we're pretty dominant in the Midwest. Oh, and the preventive maintenance that most of us signals, managed service agreements, recurring revenue, all kinds of good things for that. You see that's about 75%. So here's a look at some high-level financials for the company. We've been growing pretty aggressively in both top line and bottom line. And the good news is the forecast says we're going to keep doing that. Yeah, it's the first time a forecast has said that. First time ever. You've seen it here first. Yeah. And we're not going to learn a lot from the balance sheet, but I think we can see there's not a lot of assets, and luckily for our owner, he doesn't have any long-term debt. So here's some key deal points. So we do have managed service contracts. They're 2 to 3 years in length. We're keeping our customers, 90% of them. Some nice logos and Fortune 500 customers. And a lot of relationships, which I think is helpful. And we're really becoming kind of the 800-pound gorilla for C-stores here. We're consolidating, right? So the industry itself is fragmented. We've lost 2 key competitors, or 3 key competitors, and it looks like we're picking up their customers and their top techs, and that's about it. We've got 2 people in the market for mass merchants. Clearly those are people that we'll have to go after if we want to expand that part. Here, it looks like there's a lot of small guys, so this is probably screaming to our private equity friends, roll up, and you can pick these up pretty easily. And it looks like your customers are going to support kind of a roll-up strategy since they're consolidating vendors anyway. And finally, as things get more efficient and more complex, I should say, with energy efficient systems, you need more complex and highly skilled technical engineers, which we have, which should mean more margin. Okay, so now we've got to find out what this thing's worth. Before I start, anyone as multiple of EBITDA, anyone have a guess? No one?
8.
8? Anyone else?
6.
6? All right, that's you and Wims. Okay. All right, Greg, we're gonna start with you.
I missed the conference call, so I guess I got teed up to be the dartboard here. But I think, we obviously put a range on here so we wouldn't be embarrassed, but I think, there's a bunch of things driving someone to say 8, right? It looks like a pretty high quality business, so to the extent we got comfortable with the margins, it's pretty rare to see a business growing 30% in the service sector and growing their EBITDA margins up to sort of the mid-20s. I mean, usually you're gonna have to invest in trucks and geographic expansion and leases and things to be able to accommodate that kind of growth. So we'd have to get comfortable that that 21% EBITDA margin is kind of sustainable. But if we did, we'd probably be in the top end of that range, around 7.5. We'd definitely be comfortable using a fair amount of leverage. For us, 4 times is a fair amount of debt. In this market, it would be easy to raise that for this kind of business, given their contracts. And then, you know, we would look for this seller who's young, obviously transition some of his roles, but you still need a strong CEO. So we would like him to stay involved and roll kind of a meaningful position in the new company. And then we would do a straight, you know, cash deal here, no earnouts or things like that, and we would want to have an asset deal given it's a sub-S corp.
Excellent.
So as we talked about, I think, you know, if we're going to continue that growth, there needs to be a strong leader out there in the sales and marketing area and driving up operations. So we would want to either recruit to get comfortable that this person will stick around and be the kind of leader and be engaged, or we'd have to recruit a new CEO to the company. You know, we would take the customer base and look at, you know, probably underserving the mass merchants, which are going to be more price focused, and looking at some of that high-end restaurants and some of the C-stores that it's a more fragmented customer base. And then here, obviously, the workforce is probably pretty important, given you've got certification and things like that. We would want to look at the workforce pretty carefully, that we could recruit and hire the kind of people that's needed to grow the business. You know, plan for growth. Obviously, lots of small competitors, so we'd want to look at doing some add-on acquisitions to be able to expand into new geographies. We do a lot of work. Usually what we do is look at sort of an organic growth model of expanding de novos in new regions versus buying competitors. Sometimes different industries have different economics, so sometimes it seems like a higher payback to open new branches and recruit people from competitors. Sometimes it seems like a higher payback to buy some of these small people, so we take a look at that. And I think the other thing would probably be that route efficiency, this driver and tech utilization, looking at the software packages and what they're running and how they're scheduling their techs and some of the kind of paperless systems out there to try and drive some cost efficiencies in the company. And then we would, you know, hold it probably 5 to 7 years and look for a 25% plus IRR.
Excellent. Sounds good. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah.
David, what do you think?
So, yes, first of all, full disclosure, we got this in September, so we didn't take your 4.7 million. We looked at this, so trailing 12, we guesstimated about 4.2, because it was a pretty big ramp up. So if you want to use if they deliver the 4.7, we'll be up around 30 million, probably 32 million, so similar kind of valuation. It's a great business. I mean, this is, you know, it's a business where those refrigeration machines aren't going away. Like some retailers are going away, but no, C-stores are still going to have, you know, you got to have cold food, right? So freeze-dried tomatoes aren't coming anytime soon. So it's a good business. The guys have done a great job. They're consolidating. There's a big opportunity in the restaurant side, and then also growing beyond the Midwest. So this is a great platform. I think, you know, there are going to be plenty of buyers for this. So we're much more conservative on the financing. We don't like mezzanine, as long as we don't do something bigger. This is probably a little bit outside of our size range at 5 million of EBITDA. But so we typically don't ever finance more than half of the deal. We sometimes use cash for, you know, 2/3 of the price. So, you know, 12 million senior debt, pretty easy to get in this business. Could probably get more. The rest with cash. I always like to throw in some kind of small seller note. In a competitive situation here, you probably won't get away with that. And again, I think, keep rolling the owner. Having this guy stay in would be great, even for 20%. Would be important to keep the business going. I think you pointed out, Greg pointed out, that you got to get the right CEO. It's probably a mission critical hire here. Retain those C-store shares and then grow in the restaurant sector. It's a great business. And, you know, time frame. This is one business you may never sell, but because we're a family office, but 5 to 10 years, 15 plus IRR.
Excellent. Thanks. John?
Well, we agree. I think all four of us up here would love to buy this business. We just, as we see things like this in today's market, you almost get depressed because there's probably someone that's going to pay 8 times for a business like this, given the market dynamics. So I don't have a lot to add other, we really would, the question is how strong are the customer relationships with the owner? We'd want to vet that before, and ideally have him or her stay on as the CEO and be well aligned with that. But we've talked about the strengths of the businesses. So why don't we go to the valuation slide quickly if we can. So, we were paying 7 times. I don't think that would win this deal in the market because there'd be at least 4 people at the table looking at it, plus probably 100 others. But we would ideally, the more interested the owner was in keeping a fair amount of equity, we would probably tend to stretch our valuation up a little bit. One of the things that we do for situations where we can create an LLC is that's very tax efficient where the management team wants to own more than 20% of the business. There's limitations if you go to a C Corp about the amount of rollover you can have, typically limited to 20%. So we have situations where our management teams will own 35 to 50%. We use an LLC and then they pay tax on the cash they receive, but get tax deferral on the rollover. Plus the incentive pool, we'd have, obviously, there's some talented people in the organization and we would add to that. We have found oftentimes that 100% owners like this is an opportunity to bring some of the key people to the inside and get them aligned as well. So we'd have a 10% pool, and under an LLC structure, upon sale of the business, they would get capital gains treatment as opposed to under C Corp, where stock options typically are getting ordinary income treatment. So there's some nice tax features both for the owner, ourselves, and continuing employees. In today's market, there's a popular structure called the unitranche that many of you may be familiar with. It's where capital providers, institutional lenders are saying, we'll speak for all the debt, and so instead of doing 2 lenders, one doing senior, one doing mezzanine debt, one institution will speak for that and they'll blend up the rate. I think in today's world that's going to be about LIBOR plus 600 basis points, usually a LIBOR floor of a point. So you're paying, 7% on the debt. We were a little more conservative. I think Greg's right. You could probably get 4 times. So that's the structure we have. The owner gets a lot of cash out, and he's happy at $27 million, but he rolls 6. And our goal would be to have that $5.9 million he's rolling, worth ideally 3 times in a 5 to 7 year scenario.
Excellent, thanks. And Kelly?
Sure. So, probably a little bit repetitive to the other guys here, but we also would really like to own this business. Maybe a little bit less bullish on the valuation, which I agree we probably wouldn't win this deal because given the characteristics, it would likely go for a high multiple. But we actually own a couple of similar businesses to this, serving the grocery and retail sector, and there have been some challenges, so we may be suffering a little bit from knowing too much about what some of those customer dynamics are. And one of the things that we've seen is, as those retailers start to consolidate and centralize bidding and hire consultants to do their bidding on this type of work, the prices come down and the margins get compressed. So while this company historically has shown a really nice ramp, I think we would be a little bit maybe more skeptical of that continuing going forward. But again, it looks like a really nice business. I think, the financial profile is very strong. We would also look at, just understanding those customer relationships, as I think John mentioned. That's another area where we've seen some issues as we've done some buy and builds in this type of service business, is making sure those relationships continue on with, if it's new management or new ownership.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, so we'd probably be more at the 6 times. I think we modeled it at 6 times. Again, owner retaining equity in the deal would be important to us. Understanding the, kind of the trends in the industry and kind of what's going on with the customer base. we would also, I think this looks like a great candidate for doing acquisitions as a growth strategy, expanding geographically, getting into some other markets, and obviously a way to, increase your EBITDA more quickly and get some multiple arbitrage going forward. So overall, if we could be competitive, we would love to do a deal like this.
Okay, thank you. So, one quick note before we kind of move on. All of you said you don't think you would win the deal, but three of you, sorry Kelly, we're relatively close in valuation. I mean, David, if they delivered the 4.7, you would be in the same ballpark, and John, you felt you could probably get a little more debt, which would probably mean you could, of course, increase your offer some, right? So,
Eric, we're just hoping that you'll find one of these and only call one of us.
so fair enough, but we think, so the winning, if this was our finalist, right? I mean, somewhere around 7.5, with 4 times leverage, cash at close gets it done. So everyone agree that's probably the winning bid? Sold American.
I feel really happy about that.
I have some paperwork for you to sign later. There's a small fee.
Get some land somewhere or something?
Before we move on to we have another case study, but if the audience has, just a couple questions you'd like to ask, go ahead, Roy.
Just curious, for the firms that had sort of the higher end of the leverage spectrum, how do you guys look at these things internally? Do you have a backup plan in place in the event that you just hit an economic downturn and you don't get 20% growth, you get a 20% decline in sales? How philosophically are you guys different that you're comfortable with that leverage versus maybe some of the other firms that have a slightly lower number?
The credit markets are pretty crazy right now, right? So the spreads on interest rates, things like that, and the amort that you're seeing is pretty stretched out. So if we were going to put 4 times leverage on it, it would be with a real stretch facility that had maybe 5-10% amort a year. And so then when you look at your fixed charges, you're still kind of giving the company a decent amount of maneuvering room, and we try and set the covenants probably 15% off of our base case. And so most of the debt is going to be back-end weighted then, so we don't have to amortize it like a traditional facility would over, straight line over 4 or 5 years. We'd have a bullet in year 5, and so that would give us some of the flexibility. And then you're right, I mean, at some point, if you do hit kind of a bump in the road, you're going to have to be prepared to either kind of step in and rejigger your capital structure with some more capital or a guarantee or something, or you're going to get into trouble quicker than you would have if you hadn't put that extra debt on.
From our standpoint, I think there's a philosophical issue here too. This business is very profitable, it's cash flowed well, and there may be an aversion to debt or an inability to handle it. This business probably hasn't required a sophisticated financial person to be in place, and that would be a must for us to have the owner buy into potentially upgrading the CFO. The systems are important here too, because if they had weak systems and said, oh yeah, we're going to do an ERP implementation in the next 2 years, and they had a controller that was moderate in abilities, we'd be very concerned about putting that much debt on, because it would be a real shock if you had any sort of downturn.
Do we know if this labor base was union or non-union?
Non-union. Said so in the materials, Greg.
So just out of curiosity, we would probably not pursue it if it was union-based. We haven't traditionally done that. I don't know if the others would touch it.
We have one business that has some unions, about 20% of the business. We probably wouldn't do it again. It's tough.
Very good.
That's interesting.
Should we move on? Oh, Bill, go ahead.
One other thing I noticed, none of you were talking about equipment leasing at all. And in the energy services company business, these refrigeration units actually can walk away. And you could partner with an equipment fund to reduce your exposure significantly.
So what was you're asking, why didn't anyone look at an equipment lease?
The leasing value of the equipment is the second line for your expansion, since they are financially sophisticated, even if this company was not.
Yeah, we didn't talk about it too. The other opportunity would be to wrap some sort of an insurance product into the maintenance proposition. And with the kind of data you can capture, you can sort of look at, you know, how many truck rolls you have to this C-store the last 5 years, and do you want to give them sort of a fixed monthly price to maintain their equipment. And that's something that we've done in some of the service companies. It's a pretty high margin kind of value proposition. If you have the right data, you're exposing your company, but it's pretty interesting.
Kelly?
You know, I think we've looked at that with some of our facility services businesses, similar to, you know, doing some kind of a warranty, you know, service or something, and or maybe wrapping in, you know, small kind of replacement parts that are really used frequently. I think getting into the equipment leasing, it gets a little bit, you know, away from the core service aspect, but it's interesting to think about.
Excellent. All right, let's move on to the next one. This one is a little more interesting. Yeah.
For some.
Yeah. So this is an IT consulting business. We're at 30 million of revenue, about 3.5 of EBITDA. We have 3 partners. 2 would like to exit, and the third youngest partner is looking to stay on. You know, our president is pretty burned out, and our poor CFO just feels like nobody's going to want him anymore. So it's an S corp, so we're hoping for a clean deal. You know, this would be considered kind of mid to high end IT consulting services. You know, project managers, business analysts, those kinds of people. We have 200 consultants. Average bill rate $75 an hour. We have a sales force, you know, calling on new customers and existing customers, but our current president is still the guy that's going to walk in the room and get them to move forward. Like a lot of businesses in this space, there's a lot of requirements, you know, that they have that they could fill, you know, in an IT staffing role, if they could just find the right person at the right price. They have 5 recruiters as well, and our partner that wants to stay is the one that's currently overseeing this part of the company. Here's where it gets fun, right? So, and no one can leave. You all have to stay right here. So the largest customer is 35% of revenue. It's a chain of hospitals, and you know we have lots of relationships there, but it's certainly something that's going to make us pay attention. We're having auto renew annual contracts, which gives us the right to bid against, you know, a few competitors for, you know, mid to long term IT consulting projects. The rest of the clients are in good industries, right? Insurance, finance, government. Most of the consultants are, you know, W-2 employees. They have health benefits. About 30% are contract employees. We can staff up and down. Problems. So the industry is moving to these vendor management systems, which means you don't get to have the relationship with the client that you once did. Puts you in more of a bidding situation, which puts pressure on margins. Sales are slipping a little, and there's becoming a shortage of IT talent, which means it's harder to get them at the rates you need so you can make a margin. And your customers realize this and are starting to hire away some of the good consultants. So here's a quick look at you know, the customer. You can see our 35% customer, and then even, I pressed the wrong one. Show's over, folks. There we go. You know, the top 3, you know, we're pretty concentrated here. So if we look at the numbers for a minute, we can see we gave up a little bit of margin, right, to grow sales, and we got some back and kind of flattened out, and now we're going the wrong way. But ta-da, the good news is the forecast says it's coming back, so not to fear. And you know, same with the other company, right? Very, very few assets, no long-term debt. That's where it's at. So, who wants to go first? I don't even remember who we picked. Oh, John, the lucky winner.
Well, it's interesting, you know, so when we reviewed deals, we have deal teams usually of 3 of us, and the way we train our people is to look for red flags. And the first case study we looked at had very few, if any, and this one, there's a few red flags that appear. You've got professional services businesses, you've got 2 owners that want out, and they want out at a time that the industry winds are shifting and the business is turned down. So it makes you wonder about the motivation and how you get aligned with the one remaining owner. So we would not pursue this deal really at any value. It just doesn't fit with our core ethic of aligning with management teams. The only caveat to that is if we owned a similar business in the space where you put the businesses together, this be an add-on, then it could be interesting at some price. But the key reasons again are the partners are leaving. Given the nature of this business, invariably they have important relationships with key customers. Not only do you have a 35% customer, but your top 3 are 64%. And again, the trends are going the wrong way for the business. So the value would be, more, it would be a very low multiple of EBITDA, because the question is, what is the EBITDA going to be in a few years?
Well, the forecast told you. So I'll tell you, John, when we were working on this, John called and said, we wouldn't do this deal, Eric. What do you want me to do? And I said, well, work on a scenario. Same thing, by the way, I told to Kelly. Work on a scenario where you would do this deal. Just show me how you would do it. And John put this together and said, we wouldn't do this deal. So I'm thinking you wouldn't do it. So yeah. So I'm gonna put you on the spot, John. Assume you have a platform. Ballpark. What would you put a value on the company like this, and how would you do it?
Well, I think it really need to sit down with the 3 owners and try to assess the motivations for why the 2 are leaving, and whether the wheels were going to come off or not. And given that, I think if we were convinced that the owner that wanted to stay was going to roll most of his equity, his or her equity, and wanted to own a lot and just say, look, my partners are burned out, but there's a great opportunity, here's the roadmap, I think we'd look at something that would, pay a very modest upfront for the business, probably, 3.5 times EBITDA. Again, because EBITDA is going down, and that might be 5 times the next year's EBITDA. And then, look at some earn-out arrangement over a few years where the owner that was staying could do very well if, in fact, the business stayed stable or moved up. But you'd have a very hard time finding leverage for this business at all. A, because it's professional services, B, because of customer concentration, C, because of the trends. And so you'd be writing an equity check and putting it in the pockets of these guys, and you'd want to be sure their pockets weren't very full.
All right, thanks, John. And so, Kelly, I'll let you walk us through your thought here.
Sure. Well, I think we had a similar view of this, just, at reading it, it just seemed like a much better fit for a strategic buyer. We don't have anything in our portfolio that this would be a fit for. None of these risks, like by themselves, would be, we would do a deal, we've done deals with customer concentration, but all together, it just creates, a difficult one for us to really get through a deal screening process with the customer concentration, the declining revenue, losing the partner that's kind of doing a lot of the closing. I think also just the consulting businesses are difficult to scale as you go forward, and the margin profile. Usually we would see if they're really providing a unique kind of consulting type service, you'd see 30% kind of EBITDA margins, not 11 or 12. So just a lot of things about this that would kind of raise our eyebrows a bit. So again, it as John mentioned, it'd be difficult to finance. I think we could, if we were to look at something, maybe similar to kind of do some kind of earn-out structure, value it, maybe at 4 times current EBITDA, which would be a higher multiple as you go forward. But I think again, it would be difficult for me to get this one past many of my partners.
So Kelly basically said in a nicer way, I wouldn't do this deal. All right, thank you. David?
Yeah, pretty similar. I think we wouldn't do the deal. It's not a business that we've liked, even going back, and they don't really have a good feel for it. But again, we would look. I mean, as we would look at that. Sometimes if people are scared away from this, you would look at that healthcare. The healthcare IT spending is the gift that keeps on giving. But you're starting to see. I'm on the board at North Shore University Health System here, and we've got Epic there. And it's starting to, now these things get more, I think you guys have that, he's on Chicago board, but I think some of these IT spending is actually going to start going down, because once you put in the right stuff, it'll still be spending, but there's been this kind of uptick, and it may start coming down, depending on where this hospital chain is in the cycle. So I'd take a real hard look at that, that healthcare, that 35% shareholder, 35% customer. There may be an opportunity there. People are scared away from it. Maybe there is. Maybe you're on the right side of that, or maybe you're on the wrong side of it. I don't know. And I also the margins. I looked at the EBITDA really as $2.5 million, because I just looked at 2015. This is going below 10% probably. So on a $2.5 million business, forward earnings, we used a 5 multiple, I think, and yeah, $15 million valuation. Again. I don't think you can finance this, so we looked at 50% cash, and then probably a seller note, right? There's some kind of earn out on top of that.
Yeah, well, so we're making a little bit of progress, and David still wouldn't do it, but if he did, he sees some potential opportunity, and that sets us up, to Greg, our favorite guy.
Yeah. I think the team that looked at this was a little myopic, but they were trying to sort of be nice and say under what scenario would we see ourselves doing something like this, and so that range, again, with all of we've talked about, probably on the low end of that range, and you can see how we would structure it. The leverage would come probably mostly from seller notes. And sort of earnouts, and I will say none of us really like this business. I don't think this deal would ever sort of get through our structure here at the end of the day. But if we got the customers under contract and got comfortable that they were going to continue to spend, and that the management team had the kind of sales relationships that could propel a business, and we structure it right, we could see our way to doing something like this that we outlined.
Okay, so, go ahead.
And just make one comment. It's interesting, because in a market environment like this, where debt's plentiful and prices are high, and we can all look at 10, 20 businesses a year like the first one and lose them all because we're willing to pay 7 and someone else is paying 7.5 to 8. We'll have someone say, yeah, but we can look at this business, we can buy it at 5 times. And I think that's a trap that some people fall into, saying, look at the valuation, when's the last time? And oftentimes, again, 4 or 5 times this year can be 8 or 10 times EBITDA 2 or 3 years out. And it takes a few scars that the older ones of us have here to know that when you've got young Turks that are convinced that they've found the next great opportunity.
Okay, thank you. That's interesting. I mean, certainly we can see, it's not just the numbers, right? I found that guy last night, by the way. But your trends, how many customers are making up the earnings, that has a huge impact on valuation. I mean, the first one was about $1 million more of EBITDA, and everyone was jumping all over to get it. The next one, not so much, I think, is the way to go. Other questions? It looks like our fearless leader, Terry, you get to go first.
Yeah. Given the situation in the second scenario and the amount of deals that you have to go through, just how much time are you actually going to give to something like that came in the door? 0. Yeah. Okay.
It's a 2-minute screen for us. It's always interesting though, because oftentimes when you get these from small boutiques, they will only have a couple years history, and you won't see the downturn. And oftentimes, again, our young people will be excited, oh, I've got a $6 million EBITDA business, and I think, and then, you start reading through it, and there is the 50% customer, or you find out that they were twice as big, you know, at the peak in '07, and now they're halfway back to the peak. So a lot of it is just trying to get enough information to put the fact pattern together, and it sorts itself out pretty quickly.
I think as a comment, the reality of it is a lot of us in this room have many clients that meet that second profile more readily.
There's more of them than there are the first one, isn't there?
It's always been the
Yeah.
challenge in the market.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, I mean, we like Greg. Guess what you're gonna see a lot of.
No, you know, and to me, if a lot of those businesses, I mean, the way we structure things like that, a lot of the owners are saying, you know, given what you're going to give me and how contingent it is, I can own the business for 3 more years and see how it goes, and I've got a better option to just do that than to take this sort of highly structured kind of deal, and I think that's probably a smart move. That's what we see a lot of those owners doing.
Sure, yeah, I think if they believe they can really grow out of it on their own,
Right.
they'll be better off, but they have to do it, right? I mean,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
Ray?
Was customer concentration the main motivator? Suppose the main customer had 12%. Would that change all your attitude?
No, I think it was just, that was one factor, but I think the other kind of trends in the business and, you know, again, the situation with that type of a professional services consulting business with the ownership and the leadership changing and, you know, a lot of those trends, I think even if, for me at least, even if it was 12%, it would not make a difference. I think that, you know, Greg, if there was something to sort of hang your hat on, like the margins were really strong, or there was just some, you know, tailwind or growth, you know, helping the company in some area that, you know, we don't see on these slides here, we could probably get over the 35%. But without that, it's just hard to get there.
Yeah, I would say all of the customer concentration is, for us, would just be a due diligence side to make sure the company we sold in April, we had a 40% customer, it was Walgreens, but when we bought the company, we really made sure that there's always going to be risk, but that wasn't probably the biggest issue for that company.
Go ahead.
What about addressing their projections, which were somewhat lofty given the history that they were starting and the trends that they were starting to show? Would you look at those projections, look for some kind of support in terms of, like in that business, there tend to be pretty long sales cycles for some of those IT businesses, and if they got some contracts in place that demonstrated that there was some growth opportunity, would that change your mind or give you some reassurance?
Anyone?
I mean, I think it's tough, right? In a consulting business, you can throw a bunch of stuff on an Excel spreadsheet, and you know, we can't really judge whether the customer's going to buy, what the product is, what are you actually doing. You know, you can justify utilizations going up of your workforce and bill rates going up, but whether the customer's actually going to pay it is pretty tough to figure out. So I don't think we would be putting too much stock into their forward forecast.
Anyone else? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would just say, having done professional service businesses, they're hard to buy, they're hard to sell, and they're hard to own because your assets are concentrated. So we look, I mean, you know, this in the case of 3 owners is good, and the scenario that would be exciting to us is if all 3 owners said, look, there's some issues going on in the business, but we need to take on some capital, but we're really bullish, we'll leave our money in, and then you can diligence the situation to see if that story is plausible and potentially look at some deal with structure. But for us, you know, where we, you know, the first thing we want to determine in a professional service business is, are the owners sellers, or are they looking for partial liquidity and they're really willing to, you know, put some money behind a partnership, and do they want a partner that can help drive them? So if we get to a meeting in that case, because the dynamics look good, we'd lay that on the table, and if the CEO or owners say, well, no, we really just want the highest price, you know, we have a pleasant conversation and say we're not the right partner for you.
How are we doing on time?
12:50.
Okay. We have 10 more minutes?
Yes.
Okay. So we have 10 minutes if anyone has any other questions they'd like to ask. No? All right.
There's one here.
Well, all right, you beat me. Go ahead.
What do you on the panel see as sort of current trends in both business services and I'll throw in their tech-enabled services right now in this region?
Great time to be a seller. Again, there's, as we've all talked about, I think Greg led it off, the lending institutions, both banks and other institutions, continue to be aggressive in terms of willing to provide capital for good businesses. And in those areas, where you have higher recurring revenue, the leverage multiple goes up the higher your recurring revenue. And, there's plenty of equity money around to match that. People are anxious to put money to work. So we just invested in an IT consulting business in the Chicago suburbs in Oak Brook called SWC Technology Partners a few months ago. We've looked at a bunch of those businesses over the last 15 years, and most of them either have partner concentration or customer concentration. This one had a really nice model that was more partner oriented. They were voted, one of the top 5 places to work in the Chicago area by Cranes, and so culturally it was very strong, and they had high customer retention. So there wasn't really the risk of partner concentration or customer concentration. The business was more project oriented than we liked. That kept the multiple down in the 6 arena, and management and our goal over the next 5 to 7 years will be to shift more to managed services on a recurring revenue basis, which will make the business more predictable. If a business is more predictable, usually the multiple is higher than over time.
Great. So I have a question for the panel. Both of the scenarios that we showed you, if you're going to get financing, right, it's all cash flow financing. So where do you see kind of the floor from lenders where you can start to see cash flow financing, assuming good concentration and not some of the issues we saw in case study 2.
Size.
Well, yeah. So like 2 million, 3 million. Where do you have to be? You think where banks are?
I think it all depends on the relationship. I work with private and Wintrust and have gotten senior financing for two and below EBITDA. But I don't think that's typical. I don't know. You guys would know better for the bigger deals and talk to some of the bankers in here.
Okay, it's helpful.
Yeah, I think 2 there's less people willing to do 2. 3, I think people will do now. That used to be harder, and now there's 3 million of EBITDA. There's plenty of cash flow lenders out there that will be fine with that, especially if the company is growing and you can sort of show how you're going to increase that EBITDA quickly, either through acquisition or organic growth.
Great. Anyone else? Last chance at our panel. We're going to let them leave. No? All right. Guys, thank you very much. I have to tell you. These guys, they actually had to do a lot of work for deals that they knew weren't real, and either them or some of their analysts had to do a lot of work that they knew weren't real. But you did a great job, and we really appreciate you sharing all of your views. Phil Pizarro, who actually helped build a lot of this and did a lot of work in the background and doesn't take any credit, but he's here and he did a lot of work to put this together. So, thank you.
So